Coming up on Arirang News. In San Francisco, South Korean President Yoon meets with his U.S. and Japanese counterpart, agreeing to further boost trilateral cooperation. Also during the APEC session, President Yoon stresses that Seoul will lead the way in expanding the use of carbon-free energy. The International Monetary Fund raises its inflation forecast for this year for South Korea to 3.6%. It says the country should keep restrictive monetary policies for a considerable time to tame inflation. As the dire humanitarian crisis deepens amid continued Israeli strikes in Gaza, United Nations aid deliveries into the blockaded strip have been halted due to fuel shortages and a communication shutdown. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin in San Francisco, where the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit is underway. On the sidelines, President Yoon met with U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida for the first time since their summit at Camp David 3 months ago, agreeing to consolidate three-way cooperation. Our senior presidential correspondent Oh Soo-young leads us off.
The leaders of South Korea, the United States and Japan stood shoulder to shoulder in San Francisco, demonstrating their confidence in their trilateral cooperation, with Seoul and Tokyo's bilateral channels 100% restored, according to President Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon on Thursday briefly met President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, while posing together for a standalone photo session. That marked the first time the leaders met in person in 3 months since their Camp David summit in August. A Seoul presidential official told reporters that the leaders held private talks for about 10 minutes, sharing optimism on the progress of their trilateral cooperation. Yoon and Biden also held a separate conversation discussing their domestic politics, economies and employment conditions.
The frequent gathering of the three leaders reinforced the spirit of their Camp David agreements, which aim to bolster the rules-based international order and together enhance regional security and prosperity based on their shared values of freedom, human rights and rule of law.
The three leaders held a similar impromptu meeting during the G7 Hiroshima summit in May, after the Korean and Japanese leaders had restored their so-called shuttle exchange of visits to Seoul and Tokyo to improve bilateral ties over long-standing historical issues, including Japan's wartime forced labor and sexual enslavement of Koreans. On Thursday, Yoon and Kishida held a separate summit in San Francisco for about 35 minutes, agreeing to further enhance their bilateral exchanges between youth and cooperation on global issues such as North Korea's security threat, the war in Ukraine, and the development of the global south.
올해 정상을 비롯한 각계 각급에서 교류가 활성화되고 정부 간 협의체가 복원돼서 양국 간 협력이 심화되고 있습니다. 상반기 안보정책협의회 경제안보 대화에 이어서 지난달 외교 차관 전략 대화까지 재개되면서 지난 3월 방일시 합의한 모든 정부 간 협의체가 이제 100% 복원이 됐습니다.
Noting they had met for the 7th time this year, Prime Minister Kishida said he felt reassured that Seoul and Tokyo were working closely together amid the rapidly changing geopolitical dynamics.
We have been initiating bilateral cooperation in diverse fields, including political relations, security, economy and culture. I hope to further develop this course of cooperation.
As the geopolitical rivalry between the US and China raises concern in the Indo-Pacific, South Korea has been aiming to revive a trilateral summit with Japan and China within the year to promote regional peace and cooperation. A Yoon official said a separate bilateral meeting at APEC between Yoon and Xi Jinping has not been confirmed, but is under discussion, after the two leaders held a brief conversation of about 3 to 4 minutes on Thursday, meeting for the first time in person since the G20 summit in Indonesia last year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, San Francisco.
Also in San Francisco, President Yoon, during his speech at the first session of the APEC, highlighted South Korea's role in the global battle against climate change. He also met with 13 other leaders in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, with the group agreeing on 2 more pillars of the initiative for clean energy and anti-corruption. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korea is looking to further contribute to global efforts to tackle climate change. President Yoon Suk-yeol, speaking at the APAC Summit on Thursday, proposed a smart mobility initiative with South Korea in charge.
President Yoon proposed a special initiative among APEC members to spread smart mobility such as eco-friendly cars and autonomous vehicles. What this would mean for South Korea is sharing our smart mobility knowledge and experience, which would allow our companies to expand into other overseas markets, as well as help our own economy.
He also mentioned that APAC's Climate Center is located in South Korea's second largest city, Busan, and that South Korea could utilize this to take the lead. He also said that South Korea is capable of contributing to reducing greenhouse gases emitted from maritime transportation. Meanwhile, on the sidelines of APAC, President Yoon also attended the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. This U.S.-led group with 14 members announced an agreement had been reached on 2 more pillars of the initiative, covering cooperation on clean energy and anti-corruption measures, with the supply chain pillar already being done. The last one, which is yet to be formally agreed on, refers to trade matters.
We still have more work to do, but we've made substantial progress. In record time, we've reached consensus on 3 of the pillars of the IPEF.
The members at this summit also agreed to create the IPEF network, a means of working together on people-to-people exchanges, and this was suggested by South Korea. And also on the sidelines, President Yoon met with his Vietnamese counterpart Vo Van Tong. This 15-minute meeting came after Yoon's state visit to Vietnam in June, with the two promising to continue building on from that meeting. He also met with his Chilean counterpart Gabriel Boric for the first time. They agreed to strengthen cooperation as this year marks the 20th anniversary of South Korea and Chile's free trade agreement. According to the top office, Yoon also noted to these 2 leaders about his concerns over arms exchanges between North Korea and Russia, as it is a global security threat and an unlawful way to distract global order. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
On the sidelines of the APEC Summit, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Chinese President Xi Jinping met on Thursday local time, seeking a resolution of their dispute over wastewater released from the Fukushima nuclear plant. According to Kyodo News, Japan's leader urged China to lift import bans of seafood immediately by dealing with the issue scientifically, while China Central Television reported that President Xi told Kishida that this is a matter of international public interest and Japan should deal it in a responsible manner. According to the reports, the 2 leaders agreed to find solutions for the issue in a constructive manner and advance their strategic and mutually beneficial relations. Meanwhile, this bilateral meeting was the first summit in a year after the 2 leaders met during the annual APEC Summit held in Bangkok last year. The U.S. Department of Defense has noted that the recently held security consultative meeting between South Korea and the U.S. centered on tailored deterrence. Mara Karlin, the U.S. Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, commented Thursday that this week's bilateral security talks held between Seoul and Washington's defense chiefs focused on the importance of extended deterrence, making sure that it is tailored. During the talks, Seoul and Washington updated their tailored deterrence strategy for the first time in 10 years to better counter North Korea's latest nuclear and missile threats. The agreement was established in 2013 for tailored deterrence against Pyongyang's nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. On the economic front, the IMF forecasts South Korea's inflation to slow down to its target of 2% range by the end of next year. But it says for this year, inflationary pressure could remain high due to oil prices. It adds the country should maintain restrictive monetary policies for a considerable time to tame inflation. Our Moon Arirang reports.
The International Monetary Fund's latest report has predicted that the country will reach its 2% inflation target by the end of next year. Following an annual meeting between the IMF and South Korea's finance ministry, central bank and other institutions back in September, a report detailing the agency's economic outlook as well as policy guidelines was released on Friday. Its economic growth outlook for this year is in line with the Bank of Korea's forecast of 1.4%, as the economy is expected to make a gradual recovery thanks to rising semiconductor exports and increased tourism. The country logged a rise in memory chip exports for the first time in 16 months in October. As for the IMF's growth projection for 2024, it maintained its forecast of 2.2% from October, down 0.2 percentage points from its forecast in July due to the continued slowdown in the manufacturing sector. Meanwhile, inflation is expected to keep slowing, reaching 3.6% this year and 2.4% next year, before reaching the country's inflation target of 2% by the end of 2024. This is a hike of 0.2 percentage points for 2023 and 0.1 percentage points for 2024 from its forecast in October. The IMF recommended keeping interest rates high for a considerable period in order to stabilize prices. It also evaluated South Korea's current monetary policy as being appropriate, as the BOK kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged last month. The country's foreign exchange reserves were analyzed as being sufficiently capable of responding to external shocks. Another policy recommendation made was the need for structural reforms to the labor market to provide more flexibility in Korea's labor market and narrow the gender gap in the workforce. With South Korea's aging population, the IMF said that pension reforms were needed to address high elderly poverty rates and maintain fiscal soundness. Bolder policies to respond to climate change were also cited as being needed in order to meet the government's greenhouse gas reduction goal for 2030. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Soon, you'll be able to buy cars on Amazon, and South Korea's Hyundai Motor Company will be the first automobile brand to sell its cars on the world's largest e-commerce platform. This was announced by Hyundai on Thursday at the 2023 LA Auto Show as part of a new partnership with Amazon. Starting from next year, U.S. customers will be able to choose their preferred model, color, and features, check out online, and then pick their new car up at a local dealership. Hyundai will also be adding Amazon's AI voice assistant, Alexa, to its new vehicles from 2025 as part of the new agreement. South Korea is looking to impose a ban on dog meat consumption starting 2027. People Power Party policymaker Yoo-dong, following a meeting of the government and related parties on Friday, said the administration will push for the prompt passage of a special law prohibiting the production and consumption of meat from dogs within this year. The law, set to take effect after a 3-year grace period, will comprehensively prohibit the breeding, slaughter, distribution, and sale of dogs for consumption. The government estimates some 3,000 businesses will be affected by the special law. To deal with this, it pledged support for people working in the dog meat industry in cooperation with the Agricultural Ministry. Despite the dire need for humanitarian aid in Gaza, United Nations aid deliveries into the blockaded strip have been halted due to fuel shortages and a communication shutdown. The UN Palestinian Refugee Agency said Thursday local time that they had to halt aid deliveries crossing the Rafah border. They explained as the communication systems in the Gaza Strip are down due to a severe lack of fuel, it's no longer possible to operate and control the humanitarian delivery convoys. The fuel seemed to have depleted more rapidly as Israeli authorities restricted the use of fuel to only transport small quantities of aid and not the overall humanitarian response, including medical and water facilities. The agency noted it would need some 160,000 liters of fuel every day for basic humanitarian operations. The Rafah border is the only one connecting Gaza with the outside world that Israel does not directly control. This week, we're delivering the stories of politicians of Korean descent who gathered together here in Seoul for this year's Global Korean Politicians Forum. In part 2 of our series, our political correspondent Lee Si-hu sat down with Senator Yonah Martin of Canada, who talked about her devoted love for her home country.
Senator Yonah Martin is the first Canadian of Korean descent to serve in Canada's Senate. Born in Seoul, Martin immigrated to Canada in 1972. She was an educator for 21 years. Her involvement in co-founding the C3 Korean Canadian Society was what led her into politics.
So this C3 Society was a nonprofit group. We tried to bridge communities, so have people who are not Korean experience Korean culture in Canada, be a part of a really wonderful society.
For Martin, politics was a real sense of calling.
I felt it like almost in a mysterious way, but a real sense that I had to just step forward and do the work that I needed to do as a Canadian of Korean descent.
Since her appointment, Senator Martin has worked on many Korea-related issues. She's authored the Korean War Veterans Day Act, respecting a national day of remembrance to honor them. She's also co-led the Canada-Korea Interparliamentary Group since 2009.
So I'm the co-chair, and actually a few days ago I met with my counterparts in the National Assembly, and so we do this very important exchange and partnering work to really deepen our relations with Canada and Korea.
For Senator Martin, her home country is a source of pride.
So I hope that the Koreans themselves living in this country, now I hope Koreans never ever forget the history of Korea, the incredible history of resilience, of just pain and trials, but also triumph, and that the South Korea of today is a real source of pride for people like me and others around the world.
And she thinks about the trials and triumphs of her ancestors during her work.
Sometimes I feel a bit, tense or scared, but I think about what's in my veins, the blood of my ancestors, my parents, the survivors, and I feel incredible strength because of that.
Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
The largest gaming festival in Korea, the 2023 G-Star, has just kicked off and will run for 4 days. Our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin has a sneak peek at what this year's G-Star has in store.
Games have been making headlines in South Korea this year, with athletes securing gold at the inaugural esports events at the Hangzhou Asian Games and the return of the League of Legends World Championship for the first time in 5 years. Now, the spotlight shifts to G-Star, Korea's biggest game fair that's held annually in the southern port city of Busan. So this year's G-Star is the biggest edition yet, with more than 1,000 game companies running more than 3,300 booths across 4 days. It's a gaming extravaganza like never before. A third-quarter downturn in sales for most domestic game companies was attributed to a lack of variety of genres and platforms. So participants have responded by diversifying their game lineups. Notably, Korean gaming giant NCSoft is making a comeback to G-Star after an 8-year hiatus, unveiling 7 new games, the most among all participants.
We've got this shooting game called LLL, a collection game called BSS, and Battle Crush, which enables cross-play on the Nintendo Switch, mobile and PC. Our goal at G-Star is to engage with users by showing them what we've got.
Another heavyweight, Smilegate, is making its return after 9 years with the mobile version of its PC game Lost Ark, with plans to transform the game into a multi-platform one. Regular participant Netmarble is introducing 3 new games, each with different genres: action-adventure, subculture, and science fiction. The one garnering the most attention is the action-adventure themed 7 Deadly Sins Origin.
Last year, we unveiled the game's trailer at G-Star, and since then, we've received a lot of positive feedback from fans. Today, we finally have the opportunity to roll out our game to users.
Offering a wider variety of games, the venue was bustling with game enthusiasts from day one.
Last year has a smaller booth, but it's much bigger this year, so I want to try out new games as well.
It's very impressive, lots of huge displays, lots of interesting cosplayers that I've been seeing, so it surpassed my expectations.
So, if you're curious about the latest games, G-Star is where they are. 송유진, Arirang News, Busan.
Staying with games, the League of Legends World Championship, a big event for many esports fans, returned to South Korea after 5 years. The finals are taking place this weekend, during which the top two teams, one from Korea and the other from China, will face each other. Our Yoon brings highlights of the media day.
The 2023 League of Legends World Championship Finals Media Day took place on November 15th in Seoul, ahead of the weekend's finals. Out of the 22 teams from 9 regions that competed, the top 2 teams to face each other are T1 from the Korean League and Weibo Gaming from the Chinese League. T1 player Lee Sang-hyuk is known as Faker and is also recognized as the League of Legends greatest of all time since his debut 10 years ago.
I tend to not like losing, and that makes it even more fun to compete with such great players. And in doing so, I also think that working to develop myself is very meaningful, and that is why I try my best.
According to the global head of League of Legends esports, Naz Aletaha, T1 is arguably one of, if not the most popular teams in the world based on Faker's legacy alone. Adding that Faker is going for his 4th world champion title and can do that in front of a home crowd is something that's been reflected in the excitement in the community. However, T1 will face strong competition in the final with Weibo Gaming.
Our team has grown, and just like our coach's instructions, we have learned to play together. I believe that allows me to feel even better when we win games.
League of Legends is one of the most popular global esports competitions, and the League of Legends World Championship, also known as Worlds, is the pinnacle of the global tournament organized by Riot Games every year.
I truly believe that esports would not be the global phenomenon that it is if it weren't for the players and the fans here in Korea, so we are grateful. We believe esports are core to our ability to deliver exceptional experiences to our players. And it's why Riot is committed to honoring the excitement and the fandom of esports around the world.
The finals will also feature Riot's new virtual pop group, Heartsteel, with EXO group member Baekhyun among those providing his voice for the group. K-pop girl group New Jeans will also appear with a performance of this year's theme song, Gods.
It was nothing like we've ever done before, and we're like, you know what, are we going to be able to do this? We can do this. I think it came out really well in the theme song, and we're going to be performing it live soon, which is crazy.
New Jeans and Heartsteel will kick off the opening ceremony of the League of Legends Grand Final on November 19th. Yoon, Arirang News.
The official guidebooks to the Vatican Museums now include a Korean version, which was published earlier this week. This is according to the Korean Embassy in the Vatican on Thursday. The publication is part of a project to commemorate 60 years of diplomatic relations between Korea and the Vatican. The guidebook is available at bookstores within the Vatican Museums. In 2021, the embassy enhanced the Vatican Museum's Korean audio guide, but no official guidebook in Korean has been available until now. The Vatican Museums trace 500 years of related history and feature a total of 70,000 works of art.
A surge of Arctic air will bring frigid conditions across the country tomorrow. Expect temperatures to plummet even further. Lows in Seoul will drop to -4 degrees, but sensible temperatures will feel close to -6. By Sunday, milder conditions along with wide temperature gaps are expected. As of 9 p.m. tonight, strong wind alerts will be issued for most of the coastlines. For Gangwon province in particular, dry weather advisories will be issued as well. Dry air coupled with gusty offshore winds will increase the risk of wildfires. For Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces, heavy snow is in store with up to 10 centimeters in the forecast. Surrounding regions, including Gyeonggi-do and Gyeongsang-do provinces, will see 1 to 5. Snow may turn into ice overnight, so please drive with extra caution. Most regions will see frigid spells for the morning hours. Seoul will start off at -4 degrees, Daegu at -1. As for the daily highs, Seoul will reach 7 degrees, Daejeon and Gwangju 9, Busan will be topping at 12 degrees Celsius. On Wednesday, the Seoul metropolitan area will see a round of showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world. Well, that is all for this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.